Welcome to Business Honoring Spirituality. You have found your way to a network and community that is welcoming to all paths of life in this recognition that we all share in this oneness of life. So, good morning. I hope you're having a glorious day, and I'm hoping that for you, it just gets more and more open as we welcome our speaker today, Cheryl. It's going to be a powerful day talking about silent saboteurs. And before we get excuse me, I'd like us all to just take a breath in, open our hearts, and pray together. Pray together in welcoming this day, welcoming this oneness, welcoming this community. So if it's comfortable for you, close your eyes, take a deep breath into your heart. Feel your heart open to welcome in all of life, all aspects of what's moving and growing, stirring and being awakened within each and every aspect of what we share together. In this oneness, in this glory, in this perfect collection of all that is the universe of harmony, peace, light, and love. And in this space of openness and oneness, I know for each and every one of us on this broadcast and for all of us on this planet that we are all lovingly connected. We are all lovingly supporting each other. And in times when things are challenging or confusing, I know that these are times that help to wake us up even more to the oneness of life, to the connection we all have, to how we all connect and support each other. And for that, I am so grateful. I'm grateful for this experience today, for the sharing this time with all of you, and for the love and light that you each bring to this broadcast. It would not be whole and complete without your presence here. So thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for this opportunity to share. And with that, I release these words into this oneness of life, knowing that it's already so, and so it is.
So it is. Thank you, Kevin, very much for taking the time to pray us in. At BHS, we empower business professionals to be successful through education, connection, and spiritual principles. My name's Anthony Pritchard, and I'm your meeting planner for today. Thanks for joining us. At BHS, we're a little different. We like to start out with a prayer and telling you a little bit about who we are. And we've been meeting regularly for the past 45 years. So just recently, we've been forced to take this meeting into a virtual platform. But if you are interested, you can visit several of our last presentations on our Facebook page. And we've actually got a library of over 3 years worth of presentations that are designed to help you pursue your own personal and professional development. After this presentation, we invite you to join us for a lively business networking. But we ask that you please show up in professional dress, no bead-head or pajamas, please. We've got a special guest today, and I'd like to introduce her for you. Her name is Cheryl Pershey, and using people-to-people collaboration, a power pack of soft skills, and working with ethical, forward-thinking, diverse groups and organizations who want to resolve and overcome organizational challenges for the long haul. With more than 25 years business experience, she specializes in deciphering clues, identifying blind spots, connecting the dots, and designing innovative solutions. Cheryl Pershey is focused on moving past organizational quicksand, facilitating investment in human capital, and pivoting your business forward, toward that which it does best. Please help me welcome your speaker today, Cheryl, Pershey.
Well, good morning. And thank you, Anthony, for that beautiful introduction. And thank you, Kevin, for that awesome pray-in. Now, I realize there are a few people over on the Zoom link who are having trouble accessing the meeting this morning. So you may want to provide them the proper link to the meeting because they're confused at the moment. That being said, I just want to thank everyone at BHS for inviting me here this morning. So we're going to talk about ego saboteurs. Now, the first thing you need to know is that it's spy versus spy. And there's a very good reason that spy novels are bestsellers. Spy novels have to do with twists, turns, crosses, double crosses. And to be able to survive in that world, you have to be quick of mind. Circumstances are constantly shifting. The ground beneath your feet has no opportunity to grow because everyone is searching for the ultimate prize. As you know, spies don't grow old, but the ultimate prize for them is survival, to live another day. That's what we're dealing with here. Ego saboteurs are essentially spies from within. They live in the wonderland, a fairy tale world wherein they exist purely by wit and instinct. So this morning, we're going to take a few minutes to talk about them in depth, teach you how to identify them, and then focus on some tips for countering and diffusing their espionage signatures. So let me begin by just sharing what is an ego saboteur. Most importantly, it's a tormented and distorted aspect of yourself, your psyche. It is an enemy. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. It's devious, self-centered, and its focus is solely on itself because it only cares about its survival. It exists to compensate for things in your life such as lack of direction, anxiety, fear, and trauma, which have not been resolved. In fact, the longer an issue is ignored or a trauma exists without being taken care of, it becomes easier and easier for the ego saboteur to subtly come in and just take control. Now, we all have life stories. Some we share, others we hold close to our vests. We submerge inside our inner safety deposit box all of these feelings and things that we just cannot find a way to deal with. What we do not understand at the time is that these ego saboteurs, because they are parts of our own psyche, they never got in the box, so you can't lock them up. So there's this cast of characters, and just so you know, there's usually more than one running around, and they've taken up permanent residence in your brain, and they cause all kinds of mischief, and you interact with them without even realizing it on a daily basis. Now, the one thing they do love, attention. And I have to tell you, it's not always the good kind that they're after. Further, they're master manipulators. They crave attention, good or bad, and they'll just wait for the next opportunity to exploit your vulnerability like a good blackmailer. Now, you have to understand that none of us are immune. All of us at some point have self-sabotaged and allowed these ego saboteurs free rein because it's easier than dealing with the underlying issue that may have created them. Whoa, self-sabotage? What are you talking about? Why would anyone want to self-sabotage? Well, I'm going to tell you. Because generally speaking, most of the time we function in between two states. We have our conscious and we have our subconscious lives. And most of the time We're focused on making split-second decisions. We use a lot of energy in our conscious state to focus on roughly, the average person focuses on only about 50 to 75 core decisions that we believe are important in a day, okay? Now, given that we make upwards of 50 to 75,000 split-second decisions, you can see that we just don't have the bandwidth to be available all the time. So decision making takes a lot of energy. Some we focus, like I said, the 50 to 75 decisions we're aware of, and the rest of the time, that's when our self-saboteurs can come out and take control. And that's when we are most at risk. Our self-sabotage behavior has been picked up from our families over the years, our cultural, school, social groups, relationships, other influences that we come across, media, for instance. And over time, it's just been reinforced and layered and layered and layered. It's allowed us to maintain this false sense of emotional well-being. And unfortunately, it doesn't serve us well. Now, going back, when you're a youngster, roughly between the ages of about 6 to 8, you form what's called the critical factor. Now, for most of us, that is the point at which you no longer are a total innocent, and now you can distinguish between right and wrong. Now, that being said, like I mentioned before, we have all these other outside influences that have come in and helped us pick up cues and tips on how we want to respond, how we want to address things that come into our life. So it's kind of like when we don't want to deal with something, we switch places with the ego saboteur, most of the time unknowingly. It's kind of like looking into Alice's looking glass. Now, the ego saboteur takes its shape or form based on the emotional state that we as individuals are dealing with. They grow bigger and bigger based on the fact that we are unable or unwilling to confront fear and or other weaknesses or trauma that we have experienced. So essentially, the ego saboteur is nothing more than the internalization of an external conflict that our inner child has experienced. I know that sounds like a lot, but I'm just going to say it again. It is to illustrate this point, I want to look at what happens when you're really working to make a major life change. Now, for some of us, that might be going back to school to get more education. It might be losing weight. It might be changing your appearance through exercise or other things. Or it just might be doing something better to make yourself a more rounded and whole person. At first, your ego saboteur won't really pay attention. They'll just ignore you because they don't really care as long as their affect, their world is not really impacted. But at some point, the ego saboteur begins to realize, hey, they're serious. They're going to do something here. And I might not be around anymore if they really do this. So they begin doing different things, finding ways to sabotage. They find ways to strike back. They do whatever they can to throw up obstacles, roadblocks, and everything to make you start questioning and second guessing what you're doing. So eventually you start going, well, maybe I was never cut out to do that. Maybe I really wasn't supposed to go that direction. And you start second guessing what you are doing. And you end up moving away from what you started out to accomplish. And then you start taking all of that pain, all of that guilt, and you submerge it. You put it in the box. and you just keep stuffing it down and stuffing it down. Meanwhile, the ego saboteur is jumping for joy because they have just played you. They have gained more power and they have gotten stronger because you gave up and gave in. Now, I'm going to share with you that, like I said, everyone has ego saboteurs. Some of us have several. Some of us have one we encounter almost on a daily basis. Now, for me, the one that impacted my life more strongly was called not good enough. I encountered a traumatic situation resulting in a traumatic brain injury. When that happened, I found myself frozen in place. My confidence shattered. I was insecure, and my life was just falling apart all around me. With traumatic brain injury, you have to learn a lot of things differently, and your life structurally does not exist the same way it did before. I had done a lot of work to move beyond where I originally started out in my life. And all of a sudden, I felt like it was laying around me in pieces, and I didn't really know what to do. Not good enough kept showing up because I didn't want to be judged by others. I had worked really hard to get my life together and to make something of my life. And all of a sudden, everything about me seemed like there was something broken and there were pieces exposed and jagged edges that everybody else could see. And not good enough would shame me into withdrawal and silence. Not good enough kept interfering in business relationships and personal familial relationships. Not good enough almost caused me to completely shut down my life. It was only after a wise woman intervened and literally gut punched me psychically that I realized I had to take a hard look internally and begin working with and healing not good enough so she would not destroy the rest of my life. So why are ego saboteurs so bothersome? Because life is hard. We've got a lot of challenges. And as leaders and business owners and entrepreneurs, you've got a lot of things going on. Business, personal, you're juggling a lot of balls in the air. And now with COVID-19, there's a lot more anxiety and fear. There's a lot of stuff in your life that now has to be redefined. And we don't really know what the end picture is going to look like. We don't really know what this newness or whatever we're going to call this is going to be from day to day. So much has changed. In that unknowingness, ego saboteurs are like, hey, it's party time. Tell me, what can I do next? Where can I go? And so don't get me wrong. Ego does serve an important part of our lives. It's how leaders develop their personal styles. The problem is that ego saboteurs are basically shadow parts of self, and they hide in the dark places, and they cause trouble because they're not fully formed. They can make you implode personal and business relationships. And I'm sure that every single one of us has encountered circumstances where something has gone wrong, and yet couldn't quite put your finger on what had happened and at what point things went south. So as humans, we thrive on that personal interaction. So it doesn't really matter whether it's good or bad. We just need to have that available to us. Ego saboteurs want to interfere with this, and especially if they have encountered some kind of trauma or some kind of anxiety or depression or something that makes them fearful of getting close to or having relationships with others. They will impede your ability to nurture and foster these relationships. And as you know, it doesn't matter, business or personal. Everything we do is grown from and leveraged from relationships. Now, to put things into perspective, you have to look at the fact that we started out as a society, or as the human race, as hunter-gatherers. And eventually, we gathered into groups and had an agrarian existence. And along the way, we began moving faster and becoming more interested in having, culture and things that could be sustained and done repeatedly and consistently. So once we were no longer tethered to horses and plows and having to be out doing as much physical labor, we saw the Industrial Revolution come along and bring an evolution to a new level of what we call the intelligentsia, the thinkers and beers. And that was then followed by the technological revolution, the result of which we have way more distractions and way more idle time. And the problem is that most of the devices that we use on a daily basis, they have taken over even some of the most complex, higher level thinking things that we used to do. And so now we don't have to concern ourselves with basic survival. We just have a lot of free time and we focus on the trivial. When basic survival threats are extinguished for us, we no longer focus on what's healthy for the whole mind and body. And that's when ego saboteurs can be the most detrimental. And so now we find ourselves on the cusp of yet another evolution. Only this one is going to be concerned with transformation of human consciousness and spirituality. We're going to be more concerned with how we function on an interpersonal level. And that's why working with and diffusing ego saboteurs right now is a much more important topic. So you ask, okay, what can I do? How can I fix them? Well, everyone has false fronts. We all do that. And what we need to do is realize and accept that we are also responsible for having grown these ego saboteurs to the point where they have become so disruptive. So I always tell people that there are several things you need to consider when you want to diffuse or defeat an ego saboteur. First, like every good leader, you want to collect intelligence. You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you plan to be when you're finished. Also, we need to know what's driving the behavior of the ego saboteur. It's kind of like having a bad employee. If you're a good leader, you're not necessarily wanting to fire the employee. You want to figure out what that story is so you can work to change that behavior. Because in changing that behavior, you help that individual become a better aspect of themselves, and you also help the greater community to become better as well. So now that brings us to the most important part of the intelligence gathering, and that is mindfulness. And it's really great to be speaking with this group right now because you're all about mindfulness and spirituality. You understand the concept. As a matter of fact, there's a Wharton School of Business study that says 15 minutes of focused mindfulness will help you be better prepared to deal with and focus on core issues. And so since ego saboteurs are such an important part of who we are and that we need to somehow diffuse and integrate them, mindfulness becomes even more important. So second part that I want to get to is how you can connect with your ego saboteur. And what I like to have people do is take a sheet of paper, divide it down the center, and on one side, write the word questions, and on the other side, write answers. All of the questions you write out will be with your dominant hand. Okay? So if you're left-handed, you write all your questions with your left. If you're right, you do it with your right. And when you get ready to answer, you're going to write your answers using your non-dominant hand. And the reason for this is because your subconscious needs to be able to get your main ego out of the way so you can begin to go on a deeper level and access information that you won't get any other way. I tell people it's important to listen to what comes. When you've asked the question, now you're looking for an answer. Whatever happens, I don't care how it's communicated, write it down. It might be a crayon you use to note a color. It might be a musical note or an interlude that pops into your head. It doesn't matter what the details are or how it comes. You need to write it down because this is important information that you are going to need. And lastly, I'm going to ask you to rally. And what I mean by that is you need to get with your ego saboteur once you have your questions and answers. And you need to, number one, recognize your role in growing the ego saboteur. You need to also recognize that it is up to you to no longer surrender control. Secondly, acknowledge you must let the ego saboteur know that you are aware of them and their quote unquote contributions to your life. Thirdly, lessons learned. Now that you have questions and answers, what kind of patterns do you see there? What is the underlying issue that you need to spend time healing? And what does this tell you about yourself? And lastly, why? What are you going to do about this now? How will you make these changes with your ego saboteur so you can come together and work together instead of allowing the ego saboteur to usurp your life and take control? This is the point at which you take back your power. So I hope that this little bit of information here has been enough to help you understand, number one, what an ego saboteur is, how it takes control, and also how you can turn around and get information to help you diffuse and work with or defeat your ego saboteur. In other words, bring them in out of the cold, bring them back from the wonderland, and help them help you to become more successful in the life that you have chosen. It is necessary for us to reclaim these shadow pieces in order if we want to have the life that we've always wanted to live. And remember, nothing happens overnight. So get out of your head and don't be so hard on yourself. And most importantly, I just want to end with whatever you do and however you do it, remember, be kind to yourself, be patient, and love yourself. And thank you very much for allowing me this time this morning. Thank you.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hello.
Looks like we've got a question from Kathy Ziola.
Okay.
She asks, what question do we ask to find our saboteur?
What do you want to know about your saboteur, Kathy? That's the first question. You just as if you were meeting a new person and you wanted to leverage that relationship, what do you want to know about that individual? What's important for you so that you can then make a decision about something else? So you just kind of build on that.
Well, it's definitely a great topic of discussion, a great way to look at it, to uncover those hidden or those silent underlying saboteurs. It's just a great word for what they are. And if you had an aha moment, or if you'd like to visit and meet the rest of our community in a more intimate setting, we invite you to join us in our Zoom meeting where we take about 30 minutes to discuss this more in depth. And so there's the information to join our meeting. If you'd like to learn more about Cheryl, you can visit her LinkedIn page here at linkedin.com/in/Cheryl Pershey. Or you could send her an email at prse2013@gmail.com. And with that, I'll end our live broadcast by simply inviting you to join us at our next live broadcast.
Well,
Thanks
thank
again
you
for
all.
watching. We'll see you soon.